Hi, folks. It's Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. You guys are getting spoiled. Three radio live streams in one day. I'd like to talk in this essay about the propensity of certain peoples and groups to take an interest, show an interest, and visit historical or cultural monuments, places like museums or art galleries, or maybe visiting famous battlefields, for example, or going to visit the house of Mozart or of Pablo Picasso or something like that. So historical and cultural things that are relevant to the area that you're visiting. Now, you may visit places in your own country, and I made a point of doing that. But when I was doing a lot of travel on business, traveling pretty much all the time, I made a point wherever I went of trying to visit the local historical monuments, the museums and so on. So now, if I was traveling on my own, which was often the case, I had no one else to worry about. I would just go ahead and sort of do it if I had the time. When I first started business traveling, I was fairly junior, and they used to work me like a dog, and nights and weekends were for traveling to the next location. So I very rarely got time to do much, and I'd maybe in a taxi would be driving past statues of Julius Caesar or something like that, but never really had the time. As I sort of progressed through the ranks, I got more discretion as to where I went, and certainly could stay at a better class of hotel, and could go and see some of these places. For example, in Philadelphia, I'd always wanted to go and see the Liberty Bell, and the place where the Declaration of Independence was first, or the rudiments of it at least, were first penned out by John Adams and James Madison and those sort of guys. For those who haven't been there, they've actually got that building is still there, and the room that they met in is still there. It's alleged that the furniture they sat on is still there. I don't know whether that's so, but so I was busting to get in there as these sorts of things interest me. But if I was traveling with a group of people, I'd find maybe they were from suppliers, major suppliers, or even major customers or something like that. But we'd be in a group, and I'd find very few of them were interested in going to these sort of places, and even ones who hadn't seen them. And that even went for the locals. I was staying at a hotel which was really about a 10-minute walk away from the Liberty Bell, and I mentioned because I was a regular at this hotel, I mentioned to one of the I think it was the maitre d' for the breakfasts, and I said, I'm going to see the Liberty Bell, and she'd never been there. And she was a local and worked only minutes away from it. And I was quite surprised. That's a very, in my view at least, a very important part of American history, and sort of integral, if you like, to the Declaration of Independence, and indeed the independence of the American nation at the time. And yet, not only had she not been there, but she wasn't really interested. And I was a little surprised by that. But there you go. And she was like I think she was doing a master's or a PhD at college or something. So you'd think somebody of that level of intellectual sophistication or theoretical, I think she was an affirmative action student, but would have shown some interest, but no. So I found most of the time people I was with didn't want to go. So in some cases it was too politically sensitive for me to leave them and go off and do my own thing. At other times they could go off and do whatever they wanted to do. So they wanted to go and play golf, for example, or go out and get drunk or something like that. And then I could leave them to do that, and I could duck out and go to the museum and the like. And this was the same whether it was Western countries or say, some of the third world countries. They wanted or tried to be proud of their history in some ways. And so in place, or even middle economies that were on the way up, such as Malaysia in the earlier days and that sort of thing, I'd want to go to the museums. Now, some of these third world countries, they're surprised that the white boy wants to go to the museum or shows any interest in the local culture. Most of the people there don't give a shit. So why should Whitey? And most of these places have a rather low opinion of white people, and they think that white people just come to their country for things like sex holidays, whatever. And you try and point out or try and explain class differences to these people, that there are certain people, certain attitudes and certain views that are quite vulgar and rather unpleasant. And there are those people, but there are also people who are very cultured and who wouldn't dream of behaving in that sort of way. I remember in one it was, I can't remember what it was now, but I think it was some of the employees of a company that where I'd been talking to, and I was a bit of a novelty. I was white, Western, and all that sort of stuff. And some of the girls came out to talk to me as I was waiting outside for the chauffeur, and they were, and I was mentioning to them that I'm actually going to go to the museum, and they looked at each other as if they couldn't believe it, or I was making up some story. And one of them leaned over, don't you want massage fuck? No, I don't want massage fuck. No, I'm okay, thanks. I'll go to the museum. But they sort of thought that exchange was rather hilarious. And other times, I was at I suppose you'd call it a series of historical monuments, a bit like a sort of a Stonehenge type concept, where there were various statues of this very, very poor third world country that allegedly had been carved out of stone thousands of years ago. And some school kids were having an excursion there. I assume, a cultural excursion of some sort. They were young girls, I guess 15, 16. And then I heard that they were in a group and they saw me and started screaming and running towards me. And I was wondering if maybe my life was in danger. But they said, and their English wasn't that good, but I spoke some of the local language. They said that I was the only white guy they'd ever seen in any cultural place they'd been to. So they insisted that I had to have my photograph taken with them. So I must have looked rather bewildered when and the teacher looked bewildered who was with them, and was I think scolding them for their lack of attention to the cultural issues that they were there for. But very few people in any place that I go visit, and Westerners don't visit the cultural icons of or historical icons of non-white countries. Now, there are various tourist destinations where people are bussed in. So, for example, there are tour buses that go direct to Mozart's house, and or the house that he used to live in, or direct to I don't know, the former art studio of Salvador Dali, or to museums or art galleries so the art of El Greco and so on is on display. And these are 500 plus years old. They're timeless pieces in many ways, or the Louvre in Paris, Tower of London in England. But once you get away from the tourist bus delivery, where they just dropped en masse as part of a wider tour group, once you get away from that, then you see that the people that are making the effort to visit the cultural and historical icons that otherwise may not get visited, and most people don't show any interest in. But I made a point of doing it, and I quite enjoyed doing it. I got a history book, for example, Tacitus, the Annals of Imperial Rome, and Suetonius. These are the Pliny and so on, the historians of ancient Rome, and got a collection of the books there, and the descriptions of say Julius Caesar walked down this Via Flaminia or the Appian Way or something, went down this road, then turned left at the Forum or right at the Colosseum or something. So I'd go and walk those same walks, and seeing as much as the ruins would permit, seeing the same things that Julius Caesar would have seen as he walked around Rome. A lot of the streets are the same. I got a buzz out of that, and I mentioned it to one of the Italian guys as part of the business was visiting, and he looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. Why would you do that? That's a strange thing. You're not even Italian. Why would you care? But I tried to explain to him that I had a general historical interest, and that's part of the history and culture of Rome and of course Italy. And he, well, I suppose, and shrugged his shoulders and then changed the subject and went on about some great pizza restaurant he wanted to take me to. So his view was that if you're someone not from Italy, is the only things you're ever going to be interested in is pizza and lasagna, and so we'll do that. Some wine, a bit of antipasto, and you're good to go. You've had your cultural experience, buddy. Now get on the plane and fuck off. Now. But to me, it was more than that. But there aren't many who take that view. I think that's declining. I think interest in Western history and Western icons, Western cultures, traditions, key dates and times when things happen. I think that's disappearing rapidly, and the globalists are engineering that as fast as they possibly can as part of the wider degradation and humiliation of the Western world and the Western citizenry. But I think we should really encourage our neighbours and friends and people we know to not take that view, to go to these cultural icons in our own country, and if we travel, to others as well, and show interest in that. And this gives a much wider view and a much wider appreciation of the world and the things that happen and the various cultural aspects of different countries. Some of this would be the history history class at high school. Certainly when I went to high school, the things like the American Revolution, so on, were covered. It was heavily Western history based, but it not to the expense of others. And the teachers, certainly the teachers I had, would encourage further reading. And they would say, for example, well, this is the history of China or Japan. Here's a bibliography or a reading list, and you should read more widely, in your spare time, and get an understanding of these places and some of the history. And those bibliographies were very helpful. And I would go to the library and get those books out, or even buy some in some cases, and read them. And therefore, when I go to places like the China or like Japan, I've got at least a basic understanding of the history of the nation, the things that are relevant and important to them. And it's also an aspect of showing respect to your hosts, that you can talk about their history and show some appreciation, interest in it, which is mostly well received by the more cultured folks and sophisticated folks. But the people, obviously, that work in the restaurants and the cafes look at you like you're mad. But why would you give a fuck about that? But to me, it's an important side of things. But I think people are losing interest, and I think we should all do what we can to encourage everybody, whether it be school students or your neighbours, to take more interest in these things and to go and visit the museums and so on. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.